gosh, it's finally here! Can you believe it?
What the hell is this? Oh, okay. So I only recently heard about High Guardian Spice when Crunchyroll released the first trailer for it, about 3 months ago. And oh boy. I'll be honest, I didn't think it looked that bad. Don't get me wrong, it certainly didn't look good, but it didn't look as bad as some of the other shows I've seen.
それでよい。何せ巫女たちは皆少女じゃからな。いつこれじゃ。
嫌われるのは構わないが、お前を傷つけることだけは絶対にしないって。
お兄ちゃん。
Don't ask. So High Guardian Spice was slated to be Crunchyroll's first ever original series, being announced in 2018. It was originally supposed to be released in 2019, but ended up being released 2 whole years later due to various delays. The reception has been less than ideal. I won't be delving too deep into spoilers, but let it be known that there will be spoilers ahead. The story follows 2 young girls as they begin their time in a new city and a new school while they train to become guardians and make friends along the way. They train, they take classes, they discover some mysteries, they battle monsters, they attend a Halloween festival, they fight a water dragon as mermaids. Now you may be thinking to yourself, this doesn't sound very good. And that's because it isn't. And here are some reasons why. One of the first things you'll notice is the art style is much more simplistic and cartoony, with it being more reminiscent to shows like Adventure Time or Infinity Train, rather than anime like Demon Slayer or One Piece, which I don't necessarily see as a bad thing, but you would think that it would make animating the show much easier. I'm well aware how much time and effort goes into animating, but that is no excuse for the numerous errors present in the first half of the show. There are far too many inconsistencies with the artwork and animation in this show to believe that it was done by a professional studio, but somehow it was. The world's scaling seems to shift on a whim, with characters and objects changing sizes as they please. Let me show you what I mean. In the first episode of the show, the girls are on their way to the city and have to take public transportation. Here we see a large animal pulling a large 2-level carriage, with what I believe is a gnome taking tickets and an ogre taking the bags. They show a few different angles of the carriage, which gives us a lot of inconsistencies immediately. For starters, the stairs at the bottom completely change design entirely between the scenes. Secondly, the railing at the top of the carriage changes size constantly, rarely keeping the same amount of bars from scene to scene. Thirdly, the gnome is seen to be roughly half the size of the door as they approach, and the ogre slightly more than the door's height. In another angle, we can clearly see that both the ogre and the gnome are significantly larger than those sizes compared to the height of the carriage. And this isn't even 5 minutes into the first episode. These inconsistencies plague the first half of the show, with less notable errors being in the latter half. Moving on from the carriage scene, the character animations have the trouble of not feeling grounded in a world with such little depth, often feeling like they are gliding rather than walking. Everything feels like cardboard cutouts shoved into bright, colorful scenes of flatness. There is a number of scenes that have backgrounds at different angles compared to how the characters are standing inside of them. Sometimes the characters don't seem to interact with the things around them in normal ways. For example, Sage's cousin is unable to put her arms down on this armrest. Why? Why is this elf child's arm both underneath and on top of the desk? And why does he disappear between scenes? You know, most of this classroom scene is just a mess. The animations also have the problem of bouncing between choppy and fluid from scene to scene with no rhyme or reason. And most of the background characters are completely static throughout every scene, with the same amount of detail as any other character, which just makes the world feel less and less alive. And it's okay to be a little inconsistent. It's rare that studios don't make mistakes, But when you're under as much controversy as this show was, you can't let this many through to the final cut. The wheels don't even rotate. There are 4 main characters that the story follows, and they couldn't be more generic. First, we have Rosemary, the presumed leader of the group, who plays the role of the generic, loud, and clumsy warrior. Second, we have Sage, the level-headed magic user of the group. Third, we have Parsley, the dwarven blacksmith who wields a hammer. It's pretty unique. And lastly, we have Time, the stubborn, unpleasant, and independent elven archer. The perfect fantasy group. They follow any random fantasy series that you can find, and fit nicely into the standard roles that have been laid out for them, and are written in such a way that gives them almost no motivation, and leaves them as the flat 2D characters they were always meant to be. The only resemblance of character development comes from the latter half of the series, long after most viewers have abandoned the show. There are 2 more notable characters in the first season, Amaryllis and Snapdragon. These 2 characters start off as antagonistic school bully characters, who eventually come around to join the main characters as allies. Neither character offers anything new to the show, even after becoming more prominent in the later episodes. They have some good moments, but could have been replaced by any other character throughout the show, with almost no noticeable differences other than they started off as the bully characters, which every school story apparently needs. As for the rest of the characters we meet, none of them stand out from the others. You have the lesbian cousins, who are pretty average at best. There's the triad, which consists of 2 boring characters and another overly obnoxious elderly woman, who is an attempt at humor but falls extremely short.
Or don't drop out like Doyle. Oh, Doyle! That was his name, the useless one.
There's the generic blacksmith teacher, who is just that, a generic blacksmith. All of these characters fall completely flat and have no depth to them whatsoever. The wild and quirky teacher is just that for the sake of having it. As characters, they don't feel like real people at all. What makes a good story? What keeps the audience sticking around begging for more? Is it a good plot? Is it audience relatability to the characters? It's a difficult question to answer. Every story resonates differently from person to person. But it's not difficult to know what bad writing is. Throughout most of the series, the idea of any overarching plot is just non-existent. We get small foreshadowing moments, but they are few and far between in the initial half of the series. A majority of the first half seems to be dedicated to forcing fast-paced school content to try and build up these characters. It seems more like a bunch of one-off stories with these poorly written characters with no actual goal that they are working towards. Which is fine if that's the type of series they want to go with, but I don't believe that's the case. There doesn't seem to be any actual drive behind any of the characters. Rosemary misses her mom and wants to follow in her footsteps. Sage likes old magic. Parsley wants to do her own things and doesn't want to take care of her siblings anymore. Snapdragon wants to wear nail polish.
I like your nails. Would you still like me if I painted my nails?
Time probably has the most drive out of all of the characters, but we only hear about what it is halfway through the series, when she explains how she was forced to leave her home and come to the city while her father is desperately trying to save their home in the forest from the rot. None of the other characters even come remotely close to any actual motivation. The problem of lazy writing is constant throughout the show. Every episode feels terribly rushed with fast-paced content. Things that characters do don't really make sense and just seem to be a lazy way of getting from point A to B. Take the final episode, for example. They discover an imposter in the school and fight him off, but instead of pursuing or doing anything that makes sense, the teacher simply sits down and speaks to the girls about not telling anyone and says they'll inform the other teachers, which, surprise surprise, all the other students and the teachers are then tricked by the imposter that nobody actually attempted to stop. During the Cave of Vinca episode, the class split into smaller groups and are tasked with retrieving magical healing water, but on the way down, all of the fountains they run into are dry. until they go much deeper into the cave system and inevitably get stuck inside of a room with some water, and are only able to leave because of a random goblin riddle that they solved earlier in the episode, even though they failed it initially and got a second try for no reason. But this all brings forth some questions. How did the other students pass? Assuming there were more fountains down the other paths, why was Time so distraught after losing the single vial they had? Why not just go back and get more? There's just a lot of things that don't really make sense, and it's not just in these 2 episodes, it's throughout the entire show. There's a lot of LGBT representation in the story, which isn't a bad thing, but when you prioritize that over the actual plot or character personalities, it becomes a problem with storytelling. It doesn't matter if the character identifies as gay or trans.
I'm transgender.
What matters is the story unfolding around them, and that's what most people get wrong. They put so much emphasis on having characters that speak for those without voices in the industry, but it doesn't work. Would you rather have a character that just comes out as trans or gay as a plot point, or would you rather have an epic journey with a great character you can look up to and strive to be like? Identifying as something other than the norm is not a personality and doesn't make characters interesting or good. The dialogue between characters is some of the most forced and unnatural dialogue I have ever had to listen to. There is no emotion or effort with most of the voice actors. When you have characters that sound like this...
That's what everyone calls me. I kind of like that. Succinct. Slime, and then boy.
Are any of you familiar with sacred languages? Anyone? Okay, I get it.
It pulls you out of the story immediately. Despite all of that, the show isn't all bad. For as bad as it is, it has some good moments that I actually enjoyed a lot. There isn't much, but they do exist. By far, my favorite character in the entire show is this cat. In episode 3, Sage is brewing a potion to give Neppy the ability to speak. Amaryllis and Snapdragon come in and do their bullying things. Amaryllis ends up tossing something into the cauldron, and the most amazing thing happens. Neppy becomes a cat man. Slight chaos ensues. Neppy Cat returns later during the Festival of Fall event, and continues to be the best character. Since his first transformation, it seems that his intelligence has increased a significant amount, and he's able to brew his own potion to return to his Catman form in order to warn the girls about the cat girl that wants to cause harm to them.
So you're a real cat person. So cute!
Neppy is real cat person. Neppy cute.
Speaking of the festival, my favorite 2 episodes from the entire show are episodes 8 and 9. Things actually happen with the plot, and there's some decent fight scenes. Plus, it's basically Halloween. Who doesn't love Halloween? Another positive is the rot plot. Despite being non-existent through a majority of the show, it's actually pretty interesting and had the potential of being good. But unfortunately, they didn't reveal too much about it. The only things we know for certain is that the evil group in the witch country seem to be behind it, and they want to prevent people from fixing it. Which I know isn't a lot, but it has potential. And finally, I think the magic system also had quite a bit of potential. There were 2 main types of magic, being the old and the new magic. The old magic seemed to be more about pulling from the earth and using yourself as the intermediary and actually writing or speaking words. While the newer magic seems to be more about having fancy gadgets that make it quicker or more efficient to cast the spells. There isn't a whole lot of actual information about the differing magics, but I definitely would have enjoyed more content about them. Unfortunately, I don't have any more good points. I personally didn't enjoy the show all that much, with the latter half carrying it completely in my opinion. It certainly had the potential to be something above average, but ended up falling even shorter than most people's expectations. And that sucks, because I really like watching shows with different art styles and different types of writers. But with this show doing as wonderfully as it did, it seems less likely to happen again. At the end of the day, Ray Rodriguez got to do something amazing and leave a mark on the world of entertainment, whether you like it or more than likely hate it. I personally think High Guardian Spice is interesting. Thanks for watching.